house of the Lord, which Nebuchadnezzar had brought forth out of Jerusalem, and had put them in the house of his gods. So Cyrus took out all the vessels of the temple that was placed in the house of the god of Babylon, that god Baal. He took all and he gave it back to the children of Israel. Now I'm going, and he said, verse 8 says, even those did Cyrus, king of Persia, bring forth by the hand of Mithra. And so we're going to stop there at this time, because the rest of it, even in verse 2, we see all the names and all the people that went back. It was thousands of them that was set free at that time, exactly as Jeremiah had said, and exactly as Daniel had prayed and sought the face of God. And King Cyrus just reigned for 10 years, because he died in 529. And now the decree, it doesn't end there. It sounds as if this is it, we've got our date, 539, because look at this decree. But pay attention to the details. This decree of Cyrus is a decree mainly to build the temple, to go back and build the temple of God. So we're looking for something else. And now, as I said, this is not the end. Let's go to Ezra. We're still in the book of Ezra, but we're going to Ezra chapter 4, verse 4 to 7. So we're going in the book of Ezra. We're already here, so we just turn in a few pages. Ezra chapter 4, verse 4 to 7. And we'll do quite a bit of reading, because there's something I want us to get here out of this book of Ezra. And we see how the Jews have had trouble. We look at what's taking place in the world today. But back then, it was the same thing. This is something from time immemorial. And so we go into Ezra chapter 4 and we'll read Ezra chapter 4, verse 4. Then the people of the land weakened the hands of the people of Judah and troubled them in building, and hired counselors, they hired lawyers against them to frustrate their purpose all the days of Cyrus, king of Persia. So as I've said, Cyrus lived from 539. Reigned from 539 and died in 529. So he reigned for 10 years. So during that 10 years, they're still building, because the people that is around them does not want that temple in Jerusalem to be built. I hope you are hearing what I'm saying. Since back then, once Jerusalem, that temple is to be rebuilt, the people around them seems to rebel greatly. And though, imagine how great Cyrus was, yet still they rebelled against him and against that degree, refusing to allow the children of Israel to rebuild the temple all the years of the reign of days of Cyrus, king of Persia, even until and hired counselors against them to frustrate their all the days of Cyrus of Persia, even until the reign of Darius, king of Persia. So Cyrus go on, Darius come, and new king come, and they're still fighting them. Verse 6, and in the reign of Ahasuerus, in the beginning of his reign. So Ahasuerus comes on the scene now, whose name was also Artaxerxes. Not Artaxerxes. Artaxerxes was the son of Ahasuerus, the son of Xerxes. So this is 3 kings has come in, and they're still stopping the work. And they say, and in the reign of Ahasuerus, in the beginning of his reign, wrote they unto him an accusation against the inhabitants of Judah and Jerusalem, and in the days of but let's stop before we go to verse 7. Let's stop at verse 6, because it is important. In the reign of Ahasuerus, the first year. So as soon as these kings come into power, before they could settle, they get to him and begin to challenge the Jews. and challenge the king and question what was taking place to destroy the Jews. Now, remember, we are talking about the days of Ahasuerus. Remember Esther and remember Mordecai. You see, they knew that they had something going for them, the lawyers and the counselors. What they had was a mole in the palace. Yes, they had a mole, and we know who that mole was. So that's why they could have go to the king and say, look, these Jews, this building, this thing that we hate, we do not want that wall to be built, we don't want the city to be built, and we definitely do not want that temple. We will, if we have to kill every single Jew just to ensure that that temple in Jerusalem is not built. So they had a mole in the palace, and for the very first year, before Ahasuerus could settle himself, they went at him concerning this matter. So Vashti is still on the scene, but just as how the devil has a plan, God also has a plan. And we know this account, what took place with Haman and with Esther and with Mordecai. So you see where all of this was coming from. Ahasuerus was the third king after Cyrus, although the decree went out, and it was stopped in the first year of Ahasuerus. And they say, and in the days of Artaxerxes wrote Bishlam, Mitrael, Tabeel, and the rest of their companions unto Artaxerxes, king of Persia, and the writing and the letter written in Syrian tongue, And they said, Rehum the chancellor, and they give all of them, the scribe wrote a letter against Jerusalem to Artaxerxes, the king, in this sort. So we're not going to read all that took place. Now they finish with Ahasuerus, they come to Ahasuerus' son now, which is Artaxerxes. Because what happened in the early days of Ahasuerus stopped the work until a search was done. And after the search was done, then the work continued. But the work was stopped in the first year. And to avoid that work, while that work was stopped in the early years of Ahasuerus, Vashti did what she did, and Esther came into the palace. And the mole that they had in the palace, who had the king's signet to do evil and to destroy the Jews, that the temple would not be built, and these people would be wiped off the face of the earth. Up comes Esther and Mordecai, and we know the end of that account, that Haman, the mole that they had in the palace, was hanged on the gallows and destroyed. And so Ahasuerus is off the scene, and now we come to his son Artaxerxes. And so we go to verse 14 of chapter 4 of Ezra, and we're going to read 14 and 15. Now, because we have maintenance from the king's palace, and it was not meet much to seat the king's dishonor, therefore have we sent and certified the king, that search be made in the books of the records of the fathers, so shalt thou find in the books of the records, and know that this city is a rebellious city and hurtful unto kings and provinces, and that they have moved sedition with the same old time, which cause was this city was destroyed. So he's saying that they're telling him that is why the city was destroyed. We certify the king that if this city to be built again and the walls thereof set up by this means, thou shalt have no portion on this. So that they wouldn't pay the king taxes and they wouldn't do anything. Then sent the king an answer unto Rehum the chancellor, and to Shaphan the scribe, and all of the rest of the companies that dwell in Samaria, and unto the rest beyond the river, peace. And at such a time, the letter which thou sent unto us had been plainly read before me, and I command, and search had been made, and it is found that this city of old had been made insurrection against king, and that was rebellious, and sedition have been made therein. There have been mighty kings also over Jerusalem, which had ruled over all countries beyond the, talking about David and Solomon, river and toll and tribute and custom was paid unto them. Give ye now command to cause these his men to cease, and that this city be not building, with another command shall it be given from me. All right, so he's saying, until cease the work until another command is given from me. All right, so we go on. We go in again with the book of Ezra. Ezra chapter 7 verse 11 to 28, and we close after this. Now this is the copy. So you remember the work was stopped. So nothing was doing. The temple would have done, but the city was not built as yet. So a search was done. He told the king to go and search and see how evil this city is and how it ruled over king. But in the search, and they confirmed that the city was great and ruled over many nations and what happened. But in the search, they found something else. So let's look at verse 11 of chapter 7. Now this is the copy of the letter that the king Artaxerxes gave unto Ezra the priest, the scribe, even a scribe of the word of the commandment of the Lord and his statutes to Israel. Artaxerxes, king of kings, unto Ezra the priest, a scribe of the law of the Lord, unto him perfect peace and such time and at such a time. I make a decree that all day of the people of Israel and of his priests and Levites in my realm, which are minded to their own free will, to go up to Jerusalem, go with thee, for as much as thou hast sent the king and his 7 counselors to inquire concerning Judah and Jerusalem, according to the law of God which is in thy hand, and to carry again, going again for our next portion, and to carry the silver and gold which the king and his counselor had freely offered unto the God of Israel, whose habitation is in Jerusalem, and all the silver and gold that thou canst find in all the province of Babylon, with the free will offering of the people and of the priests offering willingly for the house of their God, which is in Jerusalem, that thou may buy speedily with this money bullocks and ram with their meat offering and their drink offering, and offering upon the altar God which is in Jerusalem. Whatsoever shall seem good to thee and to thy brethren, do with the rest of the silver and the gold, and to all the will of your God. The vessels also are given to thee for the service of the house of thy God. Those delivered thou before the God of Jerusalem. And whatsoever more you shall have needful for the house of thy God, which thou shalt have occasion, bestow it out of the king's treasure house. And I, even Artaxerxes the king, do make a decree to all the treasurers which are beyond the river, the same people, just like in Haman, who trying to kill them, he making a decree to all of them, that whosoever Ezra the priest, the scribe of the law of the God of heaven, shall inquire of you, it be done speedily. Unto 100 talents of silver and 100 measures of wheat, and to bath oil and wine and what have you, whatsoever is commanded by the God of heaven. So whatsoever the God of heaven command, you will give it. So he found the scroll of Cyrus and the decree, and he established it, and he added more. So they gain a second rounds of gold and silver. Remember the first set of people who left with gold, he telling them give it again, because it's like every time they read, these people play the food and they read this decree, it have to go all over again. So the rest of gold where they didn't give them the first time, the children come up now, the children as well have to pay. And so it is, they went. So the decree of Artaxerxes, that decree took place in 458, in the 7th years of Artaxerxes. They make a mistake to go thinking, well, oh, the father that they'll go to him again before he settled himself the first year, before he could get comfortable in the chair, gone and trying to get him to destroy the Jews. Well, he went and he find the scroll with Cyrus. So now he's saying what Darius had said. So he's saying the decree of Cyrus, the decree of Darius, and my decree will stand. Furthermore, he said unto Ezra, don't just go and see about the temple. I want you to go and teach the word of God to all the children who is in the land. And not only teach it, set up courts and judgment houses, establish, bring order to the city, and all those who challenge the word of the Lord, bring them to justice. So he was establishing the city, and that the city walls and what have you would be built. So the decree of Artaxerxes is the decree, who is the son of Ahasuerus, is the decree that stood. Now it all started with Cyrus to rebuild the temple, because when he gave his decree, he said that the decree that was started with Cyrus, with Darius, and now he is declaring in finality in 458 BC that the city and the walls and everything pertaining to Jerusalem, and he says set up courthouses, so anybody who challenge you and say bring them to court, and you is setting priests. So Ezra had control over the entire city. And so it was, just as the decree went out in 457, they all went back to Jerusalem. So we see how long, since 539, when Cyrus came into power, it is now 438 BC. Look how much years to the final decree. And so this is final. They can't do anything about it because the mole that they had in the palace is already dead. Mordecai and the Jews is established in strong positions in the palace. And so it is at this time that the decree went up. So that place at the beginning where you draw your first thing, when the decree took place of Artaxerxes took place in 458. 457, the Jews went back. Again, it took them a year. They had to gather all the gold and silver and all the cow and the sheep and all that the people had to offer to them. They collected it and everything from the king in 1 year, and they went back to rebuild. And so we know the account. And 14 years after that, while Nehemiah stood before the king as the king's cupbearer, Nehemiah, 14 years after, went to rebuild the wall. So they built in the city, and 14 years after, in 444 BC, Nehemiah went to build the wall. So we have our starting point at 458 BC, Artaxerxes' decree, and in 444, which is 14 years after. Do the maths. Remember, the first time frame was 2 weeks, so 458 to 444 is exactly 14 years. So 14 years after the decree, the walls were built. The next time period is the street, which is 60 weeks, which is 420 years, and we'll go into that next week. But we would pause here and remember the pause, and I look forward to seeing you next week in part 2 of Daniel chapter 9. So you will have already started to draw your timeline. We have the 2 weeks in 445, and you could go and do a research and see when the wall was built by Nehemiah. So you have the thing, we have the end, which is at the death of Christ, and we'll fit in the missing blanks as we go into part 2 of Daniel chapter 9 next week. So before we close, I want to encourage you, seek the face of God, search the mind and the heart of God. People, we are in a serious time when things are happening around us, and because we don't understand to try the Spirit, many of us will be deceived. I'm praying and pleading, don't allow yourself to be deceived. Christ in Matthew chapter 24 said, see that you be not deceived. It's a time of deception. And one of the pillars of deception is always, things don't change by itself, but an event must take place. There must be a problem in order for there to be change. And the deception is you create a problem so that you can provide a solution. That is one of the pillars of the devil. A problem, where there is no problem, there cannot be a solution. So a problem is always created so that a solution can come to the problem, and the deception is in the solution, both the solution and the problem. The problem itself is a created problem. Look at our lives. Look at what is taking place in our nation, in our country today, and in nations of the earth. Seek the face of God. Seek the mind of God. He said unto Daniel, go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed until the time of the end. So I thank you for being with me on another chapter of Time of the End. As always, before we close, let's pray. Heavenly Father, God, again, I thank you for today. I thank you for your word, oh God. I pray that your word would be a covering, that your blood would be a covering over us, oh God. My heart and my desire, even have you spoken unto me, is to cause the eyes of your sheep to be opened, oh God. Father, and I pray that the eyes of men and women would be opened, oh God, and we would seek you, oh God. If God be God, that we would serve him, oh God. If God be God, serve him. I give you, thank God, all the praise, all the honor, and all the glory. And I say unto you, if God be God, serve him. I say it again. If God be God, serve him. Serve him in spirit and in truth. God bless you until we meet again on another chapter of Time of the End.